Moving on to another topic, our next guest has an ominous warning for America in his book, Letter to the American Church. It's an urgent call to the faith leaders of today to avoid the mistakes made by their German counterparts of the 1930s and the danger of religious leaders' silence on political issues. Eric Metaxas is the author of that book. He's a radio talk show host as well. He joins us live. Eric, good to see you. Thanks so much for coming on. So if we could talk about this, you talk a lot about the German church in the 1930s in relation to today's religious political climate in your book. What parallels are you seeing? What warnings would you give Americans today?
The warning really couldn't be more serious. There's no way that I can overstate this. I beg people to take this seriously, because Germans in the 1930s, with the rise of Hitler, they had no clue what lay ahead. The German church was basically silent, except for a few folks like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and a few heroes in the confessing church. They basically said exactly what you're hearing today. We don't want to be political. We shouldn't get involved in this. We don't want people to cancel us. They wouldn't have used the term cancel, but they didn't want to get in trouble. They just said, let's just go along with what the government narrative is, with the propaganda, which they weren't quite aware at the time that was propaganda. And because of the silence of the German church, evil was able to take over that nation and much of the world. Millions were murdered because of the silence of the German church. And it is my contention, and I wish it were only a contention, it's very clear, the silence of the American church today with regard to the absolute madness in every direction, cultural Marxism in the form of critical race theory and BLM, transgender madness, this war against churches, trying to keep them silent, trying to tell them during COVID that they have to close down while they're letting strip clubs open. This madness, if the church does not speak up now, the parallels simply couldn't be more clear. It's horrifying for me to say this, but Dietrich Bonhoeffer tried to wake up the German church in his day, and they basically said, no, thank you. We don't want to get involved. By the time they understood what was at stake, it was too late. And what I'm saying in this book, Letter to the American Church, is that's exactly where we are today. If church leaders and Christians do not wake up and speak out, the harms that are being done now will only get worse and worse. This is really God asking his people to be a voice for the voiceless. If you care about the poor, if you care about those who are confused about their gender, you need to speak out. These are gospel-related issues.
Just to bring up both points, would that be a double-edged sword, Eric, if you're asking the church to speak up politically? You know that there are two large parties in this country, Democrat.
You understand, it becomes sophistry. When you're talking about two large parties, when Wilberforce was speaking against slavery, people told him, shut up, there are two sides to this issue. We don't say that today. We say that if you're speaking against something that's an ultimate value, like the value of unborn life, whatever it is, like the idea that Marxism and big state totalitarian thinking, that we're going to crush the churches, crush the people, and we're going to make people worship the state, obey the state. These are anti-American values. And that's why everyone has to be aware of what's happening and has to stop buying into this lie that that means you're being political. The only people who say the church is political are the people who don't like the values. And so they slap the term political on it to shut people up. If you're not speaking against all of these evils, you are, let me just put it this way. God will not hold us guiltless. We can say, well, my friend likes me more because I kept my mouth shut, or I didn't put that post on Facebook. But the question is, there are tons of people whose lives depend on hearing the truth. Christians are supposed to believe Jesus is the truth. We're supposed to speak the truth in love, fearlessly, but we're being told, well, but not on this issue and not on that issue. There is no issue on which I or anyone who cares about this country or cares about the people in this country should be silenced. We have an obligation to speak out. And if you want to know what happens when people don't speak out, look at what happened to the Germans because of the silence of German church leaders. These were good people who believed the lie. Don't be political. Keep your nose clean. Keep your head down. Everything will be fine. We saw what happened. It's happening in America now. And I, for one, refuse to be silent.
Well, and what I meant by that is, if you remember back a couple of years ago, the death of George Floyd, there were several contemporary Christian churches, church leaders that stood up and boasted a Black Lives Matter organization platform, and that was pushed out and it was spoke upon there.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, which churches, because some churches already do speak out on platforms that they stand for. You come to New York City, there are rainbow flags hanging outside of many cathedrals.
That's what I'm saying.
Here in Manhattan. So which churches need, because there already are, I guess my point is, they already are outspoken about certain issues.
That's my point, is that Christian leaders, especially in the evangelical church, they don't, let's put it this way. Anybody who has a personal relationship with Jesus, who is born again, who takes the Bible seriously, knows that those people siding with Marxist BLM or with trans ideology or radical pansexual ideology, that's antithetical to the gospel. It's antithetical to any serious Christian faith. So the folks who are being silent on these things need to speak up, because remember, the German church, they were silent. They were putting out their swastika banners before anybody knew the Holocaust was coming. They were saying, we're just going to do this to virtue signal. We don't want anyone to burn down our building or shut us down. So we're just going to go along with the narrative. The narrative today is this mad Marxist ideology. BLM is right there. If you care about blacks in America, you better speak against BLM, because they are crushing black families. Their values are antithetical. Just because they say they care doesn't mean that they care. We've seen that through history. So yes, this is a warning call. It's called Letter to the American Church, because it is the only book I've ever written specifically to the church, to people who claim to be Christians, that now is the time to speak up.
All right, there's the book there, Letter to the American Church. Eric Metaxas is joining us live, #1 New York Times bestselling author. We appreciate the time, Eric. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Got it.